discuss campaign in terms of elections for the United States president occurs every 4 years. Often, strategy is the main reason for not being able to acquire electoral votes from swing states. For example, perhaps campaigning is done from relying on advice that is just not good. What else? There are tactics that are just not correct. So one ends up using unpopular tactics at the wrong time, for example. Let's see. Nowadays, a lot of people use the internet. So Sanders acquired a lot of attention in the media, but failed to win a single vote. If Sanders ran as a third party, he would not acquire any votes. That would be the case. For example, let's see. Winning a race for Congress takes money, organization, name recognition, and good knowledge. In the past 60 years, presidents had, for instance, usually, presidents, are selected. And, often, people make predictions that they would win, right? Many times, the vice president ends up being the president sequential years. But when it comes to strategy, oftentimes the time is important. So if you ran for president at the wrong time, it could affect the results. You would end up losing because you ran the campaign at the wrong year. If you ran for president, for example, in the following 4 years, you probably would have won. Another example, because time is a sense of what the voters want to vote for. What else? An incumbency advantage is not always guaranteed. For example, in 2020, Donald Trump lost to Joe Biden, even though he was the incumbent. But Joe Biden was also in some ways an incumbent because he was in the White House between 2009 and 2017 of January. So it's a little different in that case because he wasn't anyone new. Everyone knew who Vice President Joe Biden was. What else? Let's see. Another problem that people have is they're disconnected from technology. So I have this picture here of a handheld device that has, for just a basic sample of a handheld device. A handheld device has a keyboard. It has symbols for various things. So oftentimes, when you send a message and then the viewers view it, you might not see what the viewers are seeing. For instance, oftentimes a lot of money is spent on these PACs, commercials. But of course, when it comes to swing states, that's about 5 to 7 states every election, right? Oftentimes the message comes across to perhaps the states that are guaranteed to vote for, the blue states for Democrats and the red states for Republicans. But the message wasn't quite reached to the swing states. One of the reasons this occurs is because, for example, the political action committees are out of touch. Super Tuesday occurs at a very specific time in the calendar year, where perhaps what occurs a little too late. Let's see. Also, because the United States has a winner-take-all electoral system, which means that a small margin difference in winning in swing states means that you have 0 votes for the losing political party. Because that makes a huge difference, a lot of people thought that what happened in 2016 presidential election was an upset, when they thought it was supposed to be close. But there is logistical reasons why that was not the case. For example, name recognition is important, and we have to understand what a proportional representation is. So let's go to page 277. Name recognition is an advantage possessed by a well-known political figure or a political celebrity. But when I think of name recognition, like if you're living in a swing state, that routinely votes candidates for different political parties every 4 years. I don't live in a swing state, but I have visited a former swing state, which is Arizona. I have also done some research from my time in university and when I took AP Government, that oftentimes a lot of people who vote dropped out of high school. They make up a substantial amount of voters. They tend to be very likely to be swing states because a substantial number of voters that earn college degrees tend to vote Democrat. For example, dropouts don't tend to participate in research done by college professors. Because of that, let's put it this way: when one relies on, political action committees or super PACs, a substantial majority have completed a college degree. Members in these groups. There are that makes up I don't know if it makes up the majority, but it makes up such a huge percentage that it affects. Sometimes it causes in some election year the advanced polls to be completely wrong. One of the reasons the advanced polls ends up being wrong is because the message that is received by the is not the message that they expected. It was reached to the wrong person, wrong state. They got the wrong message, and we clearly see this in the results. We clearly see that the time and the place is important. The place matters, and the time is also important. What else is important is that let's see. Another thing that is important is as we clearly see the percentage of popular votes. So the important thing that people need to that matters in elections is to observe trends from history. For example, Bill Clinton was the president and won by a huge margin in the electoral votes in 1992 and 1996, and Hillary Clinton uh, uh, lost by 70 votes. Um, Hillary Clinton was the first lady when Bill Clinton was president, but the time is of the essence. Um, 2016, from my recollection, um, that was a year that technology completely like I don't know, that's a different subject, but Trump started using Twitter for and other things. Uh, and the Clinton was not able to utilize. Another reason is that Bill Clinton, just he understood the voters. Clearly, he was able to acquire a huge, but winning a substantial number of popular votes does not correlate to any electoral votes. So clearly, we see this with the third party. Most of the time, they usually win between 0 to 1% to 2%. But in these 2 years, it was substantially. So what matters is getting the electoral votes, and the best candidates that have done very well is Al Gore and John Kerry. Um, very few candidates have succeeded in acquiring such results, and the main reason is because they did not understand the perspective of the voters. But winning the popular vote, it counts for something. And there's clearly a difference between 0.7%. But it does not correlate to electoral votes. And then another reason is considering the, the the needs of the people. So people want a lot of people they don't really participate in politics. They see they have a mail-in ballot. They see these candidates and they make a selection, right? But and they just send the votes, right? They almost never they would have no knowledge of all these things that they concern for. For example, you know, politicians often worry about all these different subtopics, right? Um, and then there's other expenses, right? But what the people want, the people they're not concerned about all these interest groups. They are concerned about picking the candidate that best suits their interest. They want a candidate that they want someone in prison that makes them. They want a certain person in prison. That's what they care about, right? They don't. Are you gonna convince me that Hillary Clinton is someone you want for president, or you want, for example, they're not gonna care about all these things, especially the swing voters. A swing voter is going to, worry about all these interest groups. These fancy words. I already said PAC groups, super PACs, right? All these huge contributions from these, it's millions of dollars, um, um, from various different groups of lobbyists. Who's going to organize all these things? That's a lot of money. These are in the hundreds of millions, right? To